Neptune, 8th planet from the sun. A mystery now. We hope to have close-up photos from Voyager 2 in 1989.
We do have them! They're my home screen. Miss Hoover, once again, the lesson plan I prepared would have covered this topic much better, but I can see... Miss Hoover.
It's Tuesday, Lisa. Taco Tuesday.
Oh.
Huh?
Taco Tuesday! Taco Tuesday! Taco Tuesday!
Taco Tuesday! Taco Tuesday!
Run into the tunnel. You have to go as fast as you can. You can trust me. It's real. It's real. Full speed, Kevin.
It's literally turning into worst case
the latest
scenario.
data tells us that we're dealing with essentially
It's
a worst
literally
case scenario.
turning into worst
I'm
case
afraid
scenario.
that the latest data tells us that we're dealing with
It's literally
essentially a
turning
worst
into
case
worst
scenario.
case scenario.
I'm afraid that the latest data tells us that we're
literally
dealing with
turning into
essentially a
worst case scenario.
But you can tell if someone's lying. You know, you can sort of feel it in people. And I have lied. I'm sure I'll lie again. I don't want to lie. You know, I don't think I'm a liar. I try not to be a liar. I don't want to be a liar. I think it's like really important not to be a liar.
The specialization should make you suspicious. It should, because if it's gotten harder to evaluate what's going on, then it's presumably gotten easier for people to lie and to exaggerate, and then one should be, you know, a little bit suspicious, and that's sort of my starting bias.
My friends feel it's their appointed duty. They keep trying to tell me all you want to do is use me. But my answer ain't all that use me stuff. I want to spread the news that if it feels it's good getting used, oh, you just keep on using me until you use me up. Until you use me up. My brother sit me right down and he talked to me. He told me that I ought not to let you just walk on me. And I'm sure he meant well. Yeah, but when our talk was through, I said, brother, if you only knew, you'd wish that you were in my shoes. You just keep on using me until you use me up. Until you use me up. Sometimes it's true, you really do abuse me. You get me in a crowd of high-class people, and then you act until you use me up. Until you use me up. Talking about you, people, it all depends on what you do. It ain't too bad the way you using me, 'cause I sure am using you to do the things you do.
Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. Good to see everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here this morning. I'm sorry I'm a little bit late. We have a lot of things going on in the background, and sometimes I just can't make that 10-10 thing that I really like to make. But I missed it today, so I apologize for that. Thank you very much for being here. We're going to keep going with this little slide deck here. I'm very excited to be here, as I said, because I think at this stage they're really left with very little options other than to stay spectacularly committed to this lie that includes testing.
Clinical pathology, subspecialty fellowship in dermatopathology. I do molecular biology. I've done over 150,000 COVID tests in my laboratory.
And they're just going to stay committed to this idea that these molecular tests mean something and that they're picking up something novel, a new phenomenon. And this commitment is so spectacular because these people are on stage together. That's why you can't change their script. Kevin McKernan belongs down here on this diagram. He does not belong on the diagram with these people. In reality, he is one of the links between the mainstream media, theater, and that theater that is present on X, on Twitter, on Telegram, and on all these other platforms where these people have been performing their act for the last 5 years. And it could be different, ladies and gentlemen, if we can see that they are on stage together, and that's why you can't change their script. You just kind of argue with them, and they incorporate your arguments and move on. And that's because there is a spectacular commitment to this lie. They have created this illusion of consensus together, the Brownstone Institute to the Heart, to the International COVID Summits. It's all one big show on one big stage. And when you start to understand that your consciousness has been their prime real estate for years and years, this will all make a lot more sense. And Gigaohm will start to provide hope. Because hope is really to be found in biology, in the truth, in our history, that's still available on the internet. And there's almost no way they can avoid this now because the truth is starting to spread. The biology is starting to spread. Biology 101, after just 1 week, has already changed some people's minds about things. I've never gotten a response to any of my shows like I've gotten to the response to the first two Gigaohm Biological New Biology 101 from last week, so I'm very, very happy with that result. Let me just see what slide we're on here. Oh yeah, that's right. I wonder if this will work. I feel like it's overloading there a little bit. Oh, I didn't close that green screen. I have to fix that problem. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. The voice that you hear in the echoing background is JJCouey. I am the one-man show called Gigaohm Biological, and so if somebody needs to reset a green screen curtain, it is me. I don't even have a 12-year-old kid son back here helping me. He's busy doing exercises and practicing with his basketball and doing his homework and this kind of thing. Helping his mom with chores around the house. Ladies and gentlemen, again, this is Gigaohm Biological, a high-resistance, low-noise information brief brought to you by a biologist. If you want to get on the mailing list, we're going to start with that, I swear, very, very soon. I just keep not having my act together in the morning early enough to give Firla the go-ahead to give the email out. But I'm going to try very hard to do that tomorrow and Thursday for Biology 101 classes, and then Friday, we'll see what can go on there. If you want to share the stream, please share this link here, stream.gigaohm.bio. I know that you can't download right now. I'm working on fixing that. We're working on fixing that. We're hoping that update will come soon. I'm not very happy with it, but on the other hand, it keeps people focused on the big shows, and you know, Jeff gets a little bit of a break. Jeff from Earth in the chat is the guy who's doing those clips for me. Anyway, you can see the truth has been here for a while. It's April 8th, 2025. And yeah, it is the high resistance, low noise information brief brought to you by a biologist in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the back of his garage with a decent green screen setup. It is Taco Tuesday is one of these things that's not for everybody. You know, not everybody's going to break in the back door of the school to eat tacos. And there's a lot of jokes running here for me because we used to call this is going to be very bad, but we used to call the cadavers of the mice and rats that we would have in the freezers after using these experimental animals. I used to call that, and it used to drive people nuts, that the taco meat, and that people had to, you know, regularly make sure that we were cleaning out the taco meat. And anyway, so Taco Tuesday has something to do with that for me too, in the sense of, do you really know what's in your taco? And so it kind of gives me this funny way of, you know, saying I can do whatever I want today on Taco Tuesday, and you just have to eat the taco not knowing really what the meat's going to be. But basically it's the same taco all the time on this show. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, I'm always trying to give you the truth, which is that they are playing for all the marbles on a multi-generational timescale. This is about the grandchildren of Earth, and that's exactly why there is a spectacularly public fake anti-vaccine movement in America that reaches mainstream media on a regular basis with the face of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and a few other key meddlers or puppets or players or actors or people on the stage. I don't know what to call them. But we are governed by a theater where there is some truth and there is a lot of stuff behind the scenes that people are shown as they need to be shown, or are shown as a way of, you know, feeling like they're special. But in the end, we are governed by people that are wittingly and unwittingly participating in this theater, which is almost exclusively false. A lot of this stuff with tariffs right now is just a theater. It's a lot of smoke and mirrors and, you know, let's get all riled up in front of Congress, just the same way as gain of function was in 2020 and the lab leak was in 2020. We are being manipulated into responding to day by day, hour by hour media stories that mean nothing. None of these things can change on a time scale of hours. And so at best, what we're dealing with here is an elaborate theater. At worst, we're dealing with a rather amateur theater at this point, because the script has been so destroyed by the lack of compliance. The bottom line is that there was an anticipated rise in all-cause mortality that was sculpted using murder and lies, and some of those are listed here, but it's definitely not all of them. But there are a few things that no one will talk about, so I thought I'd keep plugging those all the time and keep making sure that people understand that you got to hold somebody to extremely high standards if you're going to say that somebody who is responsible for and who has done and who has appointed and who has been and who has said all the things that our current president has said, we're going to have to require more than that for us to still blindly believe that this guy is the guy on the white horse. I mean, it is absurd where we are right now with Tulsi Gabbard and these other people in the administration. It is absurd right now. And so it is a message of hope. It is a message for anyone, but not necessarily for everyone, because there are still people on both sides of the equation who are not ready to accept that they are both fooled. There's people on the left who definitely don't want to hear anything about it. There's definitely people on the right who don't want to hear anything about it, because the Q movement is still coming, and John F. Kennedy Jr. is still alive, or whatever other things are just ready to break out. You know, the Space Force is going to take over, I guess. I don't know. I really don't know, except I do know that there is a biological truth or two that we have been stating for quite some years now that no one is challenging, and that is that this illusion requires your participation to sustain. That is that transfection in healthy people, in healthy people, wow, that's interesting that I'd never caught that before. Interesting indeed. There we go. In healthy people is a crime, and RNA cannot pandemic. That's the reality of it here. We have been pretty succinctly saying this. Intramuscular injection is, of course, dumb as the most succinct thing that we've managed to say here at Gigaohm Biological. And if you feel not so comfortable with saying intramuscular injection is dumb, you can add a few more words to it, and then it's like bulletproof. Intramuscular injection of any combination of substances with the intent of augmenting the immune system is dumb. That statement has been absolutely ignored by every single human being on the planet that doesn't already follow Gigaohm Biological. It is remarkable how easy it would be for anybody like Sam and Mark Bailey or Andrew Kaufman or Tom Cowan or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or Mary Holland or Brian Hooker or any of these people who know that I've been saying this for 3 years now, more or less, could have just taken the idea and run with it. You know, even if they think I'm a creep or that I attack people too much or that I'm too negative, they could take this idea and run with it. They could take the idea that transfection was a word, a term that meant exactly what the COVID vaccines are, and instead of using slave speak and calling them COVID vaccines, they could have demanded them be called transfection from the very beginning. But these same people also failed and dropped that ball as well, even though that they paid me for 1.5 years, and I begged them to say it for 1.5 years. Eventually, it resulted in my firing. RNA cannot pandemic is something that they just simply cannot discuss. They can't even address these 3 words. No one can. Nick Hudson can't say these 3 words, just like Nick Hudson can't say intramuscular injection is dumb without admitting that he learned it from me, because no one else has said it. These people with these books, all these anti-vax books with hundreds of pages in them, none of those books say it. Imagine starting a book with a basic set of statements like this. Imagine starting a book where you just said the main idea. But none of these books do that. None of these podcasts do that. None of these organizations do that. None of these conferences do that. None of these people have managed to do it in the 15 to 20 years that they purport to have been fighting the vaccine schedule as anti-vaxxers. I've come to figure out that I'm one of the only real anti-vaxxers that I know of. Everybody else is just pretending to say something other than this. The U.S. vaccine schedule is a criminal enterprise, and in fact, the concept of vaccination is a biologically incongruent idea because intramuscular injection of any combination of substances with the intent of augmenting the immune system is dumb. That's what Taco Tuesday is all about. How many different ways could we possibly say those words to make more and more people learn the basic biology so that they can identify these people who should have known better, did know better, in fact, because they worked for the Human Genome Project or sold the company to Pfizer or have been advising DITRA and the DOD for the last 20 years, or were originally an activist on the anthrax vaccine in coordination with one of those operators, or was on stage with all of those operators in 2023, or maybe even just, for example, was a genetic expert in modifying and expressing proteins in plants. It's for all the marbles, ladies and gentlemen. It's for the grandchildren of Earth. That's why it's so unbelievably comprehensive, this coverage of people on the internet. It's cheap. It's for all the grandchildren of Earth, and that's why there's a fake anti-vax movement in America. Make no mistake about what I'm trying to say. The anti-vaxxers that are fake are traitors to our grandchildren, and they have not made any progress in this fight in decades. That is the evidence of them being traitors. They've never gone all in. And going all in would be what I'm suggesting: the criminal enterprise, the lack of biological congruence, the bad ideas. They can't say it. They haven't been able to say it. And they keep not saying it. And it's time we hold these people to account and we admit that this is happening, because our country right now is being fractured. And one of the main wedges that's being driven between our fellow citizens is this wedge that you're either an anti-vaxxer or you're not. You either like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Mary Holland or you don't. You either know who Brian Hooker is or you don't. And that is a militarized, fake anti-vax movement. And I'm going to go to my grave knowing it's true. Because in 2020, their track record shows it. And their track record to 2021 shows it. Their track record to 2022 shows it. Their track record all the way to 2025 shows it. In fact, if you go all the way back and compare their track record to someone like Brandy Vaughn, who after about a year of investigating the vaccine schedule in America, having naively brought an unvaccinated child to the United States back from Holland, came to the conclusion that this was the best way to teach it to people, that there's a huge difference between injection and ingestion, and that injection is no way to administer medicine. And this was a mom with an unvaccinated child. She was dead in the 7th of December, 2020, and that's her story. The same idea was, of course, available to Brian Hooker, because Brian Hooker in 2013 already had an injured son and was already being interviewed about it, and was already saying that he had several vaccines coincident with an ear infection, and that's just wrong. He should never do that. And then he had questions about vaccination in general. He said he would never use the word autism because these are just neurologically injured children, and he has 16 years of experience genetically modifying plants. So the funny thing is after this guy meets Brandy Vaughn and makes a couple videos with her at the beginning of 2020, he's not saying that intramuscular injection is a terrible way to augment the immune system. He's saying that COVID spreads asymptomatically and that PCR testing works, that antibodies aren't a great model for immunity, that natural immunity is real, that the vaccine studies are underpowered, but at least they're vaccines, and knows what transfection is, but says nothing. And makes no mention of Brandy's death 2 weeks after she died. Instead is doing a callback routine with another doctor in the same Zoom meeting about antibodies and B cells and really funny. And of course, 5 years later, he's in front of the Senate as part of this fake anti-vaccine movement, this free health freedom movement that opposes mandates and advocates for free speech and free choice and safe vaccines. We're in big trouble in America because these murders and these lies are being committed and told for the Human Genome Project, which requires our grandchildren to be experimental animals. There is only one chance for them to acquire the data of a population of this size and this diversity. In another 100 years, all the people on this planet will be dead. And the population that replaces them will be a fraction of the size of the population that exists now, and more importantly, will be a fraction of the diversity. And so literally, this data is only, this data is only available this one time in history, this one window. And their God is an AI, their God is an imaginary computer. Their God is something that was conceived first really in Joshua Lederberg's imagination before they ever had these neuronal networks, machine learning algorithms going as well as they're going now. Joshua Lederberg already anticipated this idea of being able to just test all the possibilities, turn all the numbers to crack a code because there's a limited number of combinations. He saw that. And it makes sense if you believe that the genetic code is the genetic code which codes for everything, but they haven't proven that yet. And that's why these people were put in place. Anthrax Merrill, Anthrax Malone, and Ebola Malone, the broker who brokered the Ebola vaccine to Merck, the company that owns most of the childhood vaccine schedule. Merck. The company that none of these people mention, Merck, the company that just had the patent expire on ivermectin before the pandemic started. This geneticist and virologist, this geneticist and pathologist, that geneticist, that virologist, that fake glyphosate biologist. Plus a bunch of people who are just in it for the money and fame, I guess. I don't know who these clowns are, but they're most of them are just awful because they can't not understand anymore. They can't read these slides and go, wow, I mean, I think somebody should start saying what Jonathan's saying. They don't do that. These organizations that I've all presented to multiple times or even been paid by, they all don't do it either because they are all there to curate a narrative to make sure that transfection and its effects gets blamed on a spike protein instead of transfection, the methodology itself, and the fundamental flaws that are in it.
Everyone likes to talk about the climate crisis, but we are actually in a biodiversity crisis, and that's absolutely critical to our way of life. So if all of these species go extinct, then we'll have full ecosystem collapse.
Some scientists have estimated that by 2050, half of all species that are alive today will be extinct. The truth is that extinction happens. Extinctions have happened throughout evolutionary history. But right now, the rate of extinction is estimated to be 1,000 to 10,000 times faster than the base rate in the fossil record.
Have you ever thought about the possibility that they might also be trying to sample all the biodiversity before it goes away? Have you ever thought about that impetus as being real as well, for the exact same reason that they want to take advantage of the couple generation window here where there's going to be more than 8 billion people on the planet and sample as much of that data as possible before it's lost forever? It sounds like a very similar motivation, doesn't it?
And a lot of that is our fault. We need a solution.
Colossal is the world's first de-extinction company, and
de-extinction company is already a mythology, an illusion that they are casting on you right now, because what they're going to suggest to you is they find DNA in a fossil and they're going to make it alive again, you know, by just, I guess, squirting it in the right place. That's not what they did.
Combine de-extinction with species preservation, and our goal is to make extinction a thing of the past.
Colossal Biosciences develops cutting-edge technology to protect biodiversity.
But look at what they're admitting. They're also admitting, they're showing you, as if that's a selling point, that he's been on so many podcasts, so many of these influencers, so many of these jackasses that we've identified as part of this narrative network, this control grid of an illusion of consensus. They're just showing it to you right there.
Extinction.
People think it's a
Colossal Biosciences develops cutting-edge technology to protect biodiversity and reverse extinction.
People think it's a scary word, de-extinction. They immediately put us with Jurassic Park, and it's not. We're trying to develop these new techniques in order to save animals, in order to bring back animals that in some cases were our fault that we don't have them anymore.
Oh, so Jurassic Park was totally gay because they were bringing back animals that went naturally extinct millions of years ago. But now we're going to bring back animals that we made extinct because it's our fault. We're going to try and fix what we did wrong. Oh my goodness. Oh, don't you just want to buy a t-shirt and get on board for this really good idea?
Longer. It wasn't a climate problem, it was a human problem.
I think we all share the deep concern about what's happening to biodiversity, what's happening to the planet, what's happening to people whose lives have been intertwined with wild nature since...
That was not a real Indian. This is fantastic. Wow, I didn't know it was going to be this funny.
Before time began. And so coming together is so exciting because I think that's how we can really drive change.
We're finding solutions to restore a species back to the wild. The purpose of that is to serve an ecological function. As we lose species within an ecosystem, if you think of a Jenga puzzle, you're sort of pulling blocks out of there. Those blocks that are creating the instability in the ecosystem is literally the function that animal plays. If we can find ways to restore animals that provide that specific function, we can create more stability within an ecosystem.
And so rather than working on an existing population like cheetahs and try to save that genetic diversity and improve it with breeding and you know, conservation programs, these yo-yos are pretending to circumvent that problem. Now we can let them go extinct and we'll just store them in a database and make some more if we need some more. And if that forest runs out over there, we'll just put some more back. I mean, it is so absurd. It's so obnoxious. But remember, this is part of that subconscious slippery slope that your kids and you are on together. And so what we're trying to do is wake up together with our kids so that we see it together with them. It has to be a multi-generational awakening or our grandchildren won't be saved. If we wake up as grandparents before our grandchildren are born, but our kids are still engaged in this world, in this nonsense, and we have to argue with our kids about this years from now, after they've already absorbed this already for 5 years, and now for a few more years, we need to pull them out now. We need to get together with them now. We need to absorb these stories together now. And this is a great one to absorb with your kids because, you know, dire wolves and the reference to Game of Thrones and some of the evening news, it's just hilarious.
We've announced 3 species, the woolly mammoth, the thylacine, and the dodo. But one of the things that's absolutely critical to ecosystems is predators, as we've seen with what's happened in Yellowstone with the reintroduction of wolves back into the park. They've shown that they've even reshaped the river systems. They brought back beavers, they brought back songbirds. And so we felt that it was very important for us to bring back the dire wolf.
Dire wolf. The dire wolf is the first species that we're bringing back at Colossal.
The dire wolf, which most people think is just a mythical creature, was actually a keystone species that was not only endemic to the United States and mostly Americas, but it was actually culturally important to some of the biggest indigenous early tribes in America. So we thought if we could use it as an opportunity where we can also develop technologies that can help wolves, we thought it was the right first project given how important wolves are to ecosystems.
One of the challenges when we started working on the direwolf was that we knew of only 2 direwolf specimens in the world that contained some usable DNA. One of our direwolf samples was a single tooth, and then another was a 72,000-year-old skull. So we were able to use these specimens and isolate this ancient DNA out of them.
I'm already quite skeptical of that, although as a non-molecular biology super expert, I'm not going to put myself out on the line and saying they can't do this, but I would be very interested to hear the exact things they were able to pull up, the exact way that they did it, how they chose their primers. Were they based on wolves? Were they based on some, you know, all this stuff, I think, in the details. The devil's in the details. And in this case, you're already seeing this kind of, how should we call it? Probably like a Theranos style pitch here.
For the dire wolf, there was a massive study that did many samples across multiple institutions, and Colossal took 2 of those samples and was able to generate whole genome sequences from each. And so this is incredible for any species, let alone species that have been extinct. So
my guess would be that they use metagenomic sequencing with a few model genomes in mind, a few target genomes in mind. And so it is like saying that you took a shredded library and tried to assemble a book from the shredded fragments of individual sentences, and were able to assemble a book that looks pretty close to a book by Shakespeare, but all you really did was use a computer to pull all those shredded words out of a huge pile that is generated from a shredded library. Because if you take all the background DNA and all the background RNA and turn it into DNA, and then you take all that DNA and you amplify it enough to sample it and read it, and then you apply a algorithm to it and reconstruct something, if the background is loud enough, if the library is big enough, then making a kid's book out of the shredded remains of a library is a trivial thing. making a magazine article about fly fishing is a trivial thing if you have the shredded remains of an entire library from which to choose your text. If you're trying to make a ransom note out of random text and you can pull from a whole library, then you can make your ransom notes say whatever the hell you want. And in this context, what they're doing is they're saying that they generated a library of DNA fragments generated from the tooth, generated from the skull, and the preparation that they did, and all of those fragments are only from the skull, only from the tooth. And then they used a computer to try to assemble a full genome, just like they do with viruses, with the pretense that anything that they can't find, they'll just substitute with a known book. Well, it was tough to find the exact sentence, the Queen doth protest too much or something like that. I don't know. I can't come up with anything off the top of my head. So, we just assume that that sentence is where it's supposed to be because it is in the original Shakespeare book. So we'll just slap it in even though we didn't find it. So all of those sort of shortcomings and patchwork and hand waving is happening here under the pretense of a sales pitch that they are able to recreate an entire genome from anatomical scraps that include a tooth and a skull, which quite possibly understand could be a gray wolf skull and a gray wolf tooth with what amounts to a gray wolf genome. And we're supposed to just take their word for it that the genome that they made and recorded is different and novel and pre-exists to a gray wolf skull. And that we just have to take their word for it because it's a skull, and apparently it's definitely not a wolf skull. It's a dire wolf skull.
You can do is you can map that to its closest living relative. So at Colossal, we're using the gray wolf, and we've been able to generate such a high quality genome that we can map back to create our own dire wolf reference genome.
And so the whole pretense is that what they have constructed is a novel genome because why? The tooth and the skull are definitely dire wolf skulls and tooth. That's the whole presumption here. If the skull and the tooth are actually just that of a gray wolf or a Mexican wolf or a Siberian wild dog or an African wild dog, then what they've done is nothing except for create a pseudo wolf genome on the basis that, well, we start with the idea that it is a wolf and we start with the gray wolf genome. She just said that. So we're going to start with a Shakespeare book as what we're going to look for, and then we're going to go into a pile of a shredded library and pull out text until we've filled in most of the book and recreated most of the book. And so now we have what we call a novel Shakespeare book that's never been written before. And we're going to show you that, wow, look at what we can do. We have a new book here. But if it's just a library that had Shakespeare in it already, I hope you can see the point I'm trying to make and how all of this rests on the idea that skull and that tooth, not only do they produce DNA, but that DNA is presumed to be unique instead of just a variant of wolves currently or dogs currently. And we're supposed to believe that the genetic differences are so profound and obvious that they were able to detect them all. There's an amazing amount of magic happening here, which coincides exactly with the same illusion that the Human Genome Project is. That these genomes are real sequences that they just read out because they're just letters in a pile over there, but they're not letters in a pile. It's not a shredded library. The result of these experiments is a model of a book that could be found in the library based on the computer assessment of the shredding. And that assessment can be tweaked based on the target, like the gray wolf, It's just so absurd. It's so absurd that they are, did you see all the intellectual dark web people and that he was already on with? It's just remarkable.
When we edit different lines of genetically diverse gray wolves, we'll create a set of genetically diverse dire wolves with similar edits, but the basis of their diversity already existed within the gray wolf.
So the basis of their diversity exists in the gray wolf, but they're making a new dire wolf. So they've already admitted that this is just bullshit. They've sequenced an old wolf and pretended that that old wolf is a dire wolf. And the sequence that they're making is an old, extinct sequence, when all they're really doing is probably, at best, just kind of pretending to clone a dog. That's about it.
Gray wolves are on the endangered species list, and that means you can't just go in and collect the samples that we want.
Typically, people have to take an ear punch or a skin biopsy, and sometimes it's a very invasive process for the animal. We've developed a technology where you can take a simple blood draw, isolate these specific cells in the blood, and then clone from it.
Oh, there you go. Ta-da! It's the Theranos experiment. In a nutshell, we can take a blood sample and we can do a whole genome sequence and read it all. And we're very good at it. And it's very non-invasive.
We're changing the genome of this living animal partially into the genome of the extinct animal for those genes that matter, for the traits and characteristics that we want to see in that animal.
So it's the implication, of course, is that they can take the genome of the gray wolf and they can point to all of the genes and all the characteristics, and they can just mod them like it's a little, a Minecraft world where they can flip switches on different things and different levels of textures and blah, 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 blah. They have all of this already. It's just easy. That's the enchantment.
Discovering which parts of the genome make an animal look and act like that animal is one of the hardest problems in biology. It is unsolved and something that we have to solve if we want to know which parts of the genome we want to edit.
Oh, so we have to solve it. It's an unsolved problem, but we have to solve it. She hasn't even identified the fact that the trajectory through time and the instructions of how to do that we haven't even remotely begun to look for those or identify those or even think about how that might be encoded and where. She can't even describe life in a significant enough way so that you understand that she respects the irreducible complexity that she claims to be working on. And that is, again, where this new biology 101 is just it's gonna massacre this, destroy this. It's gonna run this over like a great big truck over a little stuffed animal. Because all of this stuff is nonsense. All of this mythology just disappears once you understand the biology that Joshua Lederberg and his contemporaries established, and then the people that came after him seem to have just kind of decided, yeah, never mind.
To make a gray wolf more like a dire wolf.
To analyze our genomes, to compare dire wolves with gray wolf genomes, we use our tools on a platform built by FormBio. It's a bioinformatics company that spun out of Colossal. They built this whole suite of analysis tools and algorithms that allow us to find the differences between the dire wolf genome and the gray wolf genome and filter out these differences that we actually want to edit. And so we aligned our dire wolf reads to the gray wolf.
What an interesting algorithm. I wonder if you could apply that to different ethnic backgrounds of human.
Genome that allowed us to know exactly where the gray wolf differed from the dire wolf. One of the most exciting differences that we found in the dire wolf genome is that there is a change in the L-coral gene. And L-coral is a key regulator of animal size.
What an interesting observation. Like they show you a protein binding to something, and L-coral is related to size. I don't know how much we expect dire wolves to be a lot bigger than regular wolves. I don't think we do.
Next, we have to use gene editing technologies. We have cells growing in a dish in a lab that belong to a gray wolf. And so these have gray wolf genomes.
Oh, so they start with a gray wolf genome and then they mutate it in a few places and then call it a dire wolf. They are basically cloning a gray wolf with a few edits. This is really Theranos. It's really a joke. It's really a joke.
Now, we've decided which part of that genome we want to change.
In fact, I would be willing to bet that when they did this, they had to use hundreds of embryos to get one to land. I bet dollars to donuts.
So one at a time, we take our gene editing tools and we go into that cell and we cut out the bit of DNA that looks like a gray wolf and
look at that, look at how they showed that. They showed them sucking stuff out of a cell. And now they're saying that's how they get the DNA out? Are they really saying that?
The DNA that looks like a dire. One at a time, we take our gene editing tools and we go into that cell and we cut out the bit of DNA.
That is freaking remarkable. That is freaking remarkable because that has nothing to do with what this lady's saying. So now, can you take these people seriously, or are they actually pulling a little snake oil on you here? I don't think you can see anything else other than snake oil if they say that we pull the gene out as they show them removing the contents of an ovum. It's like...
that looks like a gray wolf and paste in its place the DNA that looks like a dire wolf.
Each time you edit the gene in a cell, you put a lot of stress on that cell because you have to get your gene editing tools in these cells and then these changes are made. So what we do instead is we try to make dozens or hundreds of changes at once. It's called multiplex gene editing.
So now we have cells growing in a dish in a lab that have DNA that makes them a little bit more dire wolf-like than gray wolf-like. We have to transform these living cells.
It's weird that they had to show a bacterial culture there, isn't it? I wonder what they're using the bacterial culture for. It's very strange that they just happened to... Oops, sorry. That's a bacterial culture. What do you need that for? What are you making there? Let's just go back once just to make sure you see that was a bacterial culture. And
into actual pups growing in a dish in a lab that belonged to a gray wolf. And so these have gray wolf genomes. Now we've decided which part of that genome we want to change. So one at a time, we take our gene editing tools and we go into that cell and we cut out the bit of DNA that looks like a gray wolf and paste in its place the DNA that looks like a dire wolf.
Each time you edit the gene in a cell, you put a lot of stress on that cell because you have to get your gene editing tools in these cells and then these changes are made. So what we do instead is we try to make dozens or hundreds of changes at once. It's called multiplex gene editing.
So now we have cells growing in a dish in a lab that have DNA that makes them a little bit more dire wolf-like than gray wolf-like.
That's not a cell culture. So they are making these changes using plasmids in bacteria. They are generating large quantities of pure DNA in bacteria. They are selecting from these quantities of DNA the DNA that they want. It's not them. They're using bacterial cell techniques to create the DNA and to get the DNA to be mutated in the ways that they want. They're creating libraries of randoms and selecting from them. They're doing things with bacterial cultures, ladies and gentlemen, and pretending that this has nothing to do with biology. Who cares about microbiology? Who's Joshua Lederberg?
We have to transform these living cells into actual pups.
We have to transform these living cells, and they do that with bacteriophages. They do that with bacterial genetics. They do that with synthetic biology, which is just bacterial recombinant DNA. It's crazy. This is just as fake as RNA virology is.
And for that, we use a process called cloning, or somatic cell nuclear transfer. This is the same process that most famously brought us Dolly the sheep.
They are actually cloning a dog, and they're putting a few mutations in it that they claim are derived from a tooth and a skull fragment that they say is a dire wolf. That's the whole premise here.
You take an egg, an oocyte, from a wolf or a dog, you take out its own DNA and you stick that direwolf cell in it.
That cell?
There was already the magic, the direwolf cell in it. It's not a direwolf cell. It was a gray wolf cell. You said it yourself. And then you use bacterial genetics to make mutations in the DNA of it. It's just crazy.
It becomes an embryo that's a direwolf. It's no longer a domestic dog, which sounds totally science fiction. And with the help of a vet team, we then are able to surgically put this embryo back inside to the surrogate dog.
We have to find an appropriate dog that can carry our direwolf.
There's a reason why these people are so young. And it's because they can't possibly have the requisite biological experience and knowledge to judge whether they're doing anything real or imaginary. They can't possibly. And so they can be told what they're doing, they believe what they're doing, and then it's really a magic trick here.
Everyone is thinking very critically about each step so that when that pup is finally born...
Those are children! Those are children. Those are actors at best, but these are not the people that are making the decisions on the molecular biology lab bench that's running these plasmids and growing them using the SV40 promoter. I mean, give me a break.
We know there aren't any issues.
The safety of all of our surrogates for any of our species is the highest priority.
For any of our species. The safety of the surrogate moms that we use is the highest priority because this is really about the animals.
We have an overemphasis on our animal husbandry team to secure their safety, as well as are pursuing on the science side our own exogenous development team so that one day we won't have to use surrogates.
Exogenous development team so we won't have to use surrogates. We'll just use our own bioengineered animals, which are really...
The most exciting part is when the vet team comes in, they do their ultrasound and they say, yeah, congrats, you're going to be a puppy mom, or, you know.
So that's exciting. There's only 2 pups right now. What is she talking about? Do they have a lot more pups that they haven't announced? Or were they doing this incrementally with like 1 change and then 2 changes? Or then when they got lucky, they tried that one. And they didn't announce it until now when they have like so many that they were able to get so many changes that they can identify, and so they're showing you now something that is a result they can claim.
You're going to have a cub on the ground in a couple weeks. After the pups are delivered, there's a care team in place. They're there to make sure that
is she gonna cry?
Pups are happy and healthy, and that mom...
They keep saying dire wolves, and it's just annoying.
...has gone through delivery without any problems. And then we have another team that will
That's not
ensure
them.
that our...
That's not them. That's a Mexican wolf. That's so stupid, it's not even funny. Those are wolves in a zoo.
Pups have the right dynamics. They have the right social structures.
We're working actively right now with partners today to make sure that there are solutions and places for these animals to go in the future.
And then they're going to let them out in the wild because that's what they're doing? Like, what? Really? Are you going to put them back where they ecologically belong? Are you going to put them back where they ecologically belong to the detriment of those that are already there? Will they interbreed? I mean, what kind of bullshit nonsense is this? This can't be real.
And it's really important to say that all of this is done in...
But it can be that all of these people are bamboozled. It can be that all of these scientists are not sophisticated enough to understand that the Human Genome Project is an elaborate theater that requires decades more data collection and probably decades more of reiteration before any meaningful results will come. They don't even have the infrastructure to integrate that data with all the medical data we have. That's why they're building all those things in Texas right now. Come on, this is a joke.
In this massive network.
It's critical to work with private landowners, local governments, indigenous people groups, and the public at large to do that in a way that's safe.
What a magnificent cat herding operation. Look at how many intelligent, motivated people are dedicating energy to this bullshit. that could otherwise be fighting a U.S. vaccine schedule that's criminal and is spreading the word that intramuscular injection is so dumb and we should stop doing it to our children now. But they're focused on de-extinction.
And publicly accepted, but also it's good for the ecosystem and the animals themselves.
What we're doing is having all of this collaboration in place well before we have these animals, and this is absolutely critical to making this work successful.
We're a part of the evolutionary stream of the planet. We're kin to every other species out there. And so because we have the ability to shape the world, I think we have a responsibility to correct our mistakes from the past.
What we do today is, I think, what the hope for the future is for biodiversity and for nature. And so to be on sort of the ground floor of creating a tool that will be the solution for our biodiversity crisis is the most motivating thought that I could ever have.
A solution to our biodiversity crisis. We'll just make them. I mean, I can't really fathom it, but it is very clear that these people believe. They believe in this idea, this cause, and it is because they thoroughly believe in the bad biology 101, where evolution becomes DNA. It's a disaster. That's why we need to save our children together, because they're surrounded by adults that are absolutely lost.
What we're doing at Colossal has never been done before.
I hope everyone around the world is leveraging the technologies that we develop here, and I hope that biodiversity loss and extinction is just a thing of the past.
The idea of being able to have direwolves again is tremendously, personally exciting, and I think it's going to be exciting to a lot of people.
The first time I see a direwolf, oh my God.
Direwolf's a big fluffy dog that I probably wouldn't pet.
I think it's going to be amazing in a lot of ways.
I'm really excited to see the birth of this direwolf pup and all the hard work that all of the teams have contributed to. There's so many people that have had their hand in this that it's just fulfilling for us to see, okay, we did it. We produced something that is magnificent and science fiction at its finest.
Looks a lot like Micah, I gotta say. Although Micah doesn't have quite that shepherdy nose. He's got a stouter, stronger nose. They look a little foxy. They might have made that with the same little thing that I make mine with. That is amazeballs. Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to share this with you. I think of it a little bit like the Netherlands. Eventually, they will be underwater again. It is an inevitability because the pumps need gas and the dikes need maintenance, and they live in denial, yet their system will chug along until the diesel engines stop or some other catastrophic failure occurs. The Dutch will never abandon their project. So, in case you're not aware, most of the northern part of the Netherlands is technically under sea level, and it is only kept dry by a lot of diesel-fueled pumps that pump water out of that region of the Netherlands 100%, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Yes, there are dikes, but that's underwater. And if they stopped the pumps, that place would flood. And so eventually, because of weather or collapse or erosion or just the fact that those pumps get turned off for a little while, the Netherlands will eventually be underwater. But none of those people are going to abandon their lives there. None of those people are going to abandon that project, even though it is a certainty. If it's in 100 years or 1,000 years, that some or all of the Netherlands is going to go back underwater. Now, my argument is that the overclass, the people that for whom the overclass is the people for whom money doesn't matter, the overclass can predict and orchestrate societal failures, and therefore can also frame social media governance in the context of knowing what failures are coming. The overclass can predict and orchestrate societal failures and therefore can also frame social media governance in the context of knowing what failures are coming. In other words, they can use militarized social media representations of these crises to curate mythologies most advantageous to the overclass. And militarized social media representations are composed primarily of coordinated groups of liars, supported by anonymous bots, sock puppets, i.e. digital Truman shows. And so the overclass is never going to abandon this project and the myths that edify it, and there will be new myths. And so this project extends back to the 50s and to the 30s, before DNA, when they already had the plan to take over the evolution of the species in a eugenics kind of way, making sure that they were breeding the right people. And more importantly, making sure that they could collect this data before they got rid of us. And this plan is not going away because it's on a longer time scale than social media can ever represent. And so unless you really start to understand that this is a game that they can lose in the short term because they're committed to winning it in the long term. They can even have a loss that lasts for 6 months. They can have a setback that lasts as long as Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is Health and Human Services Secretary, and the actual project is not going to change. It's not going to go away. Kevin McKernan is still going to have a job after Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is used up and gone. Ladies and gentlemen, synthetic recombinant genetics is all that they have. The vast majority of our tools are derived from bacteria and bacteriophages. Even the CRISPR-Cas9 system is a bacteriophage system. And they can make large quantities of DNA, and they've been doing it for a long time. They can put those things places. But PCR as a diagnostic is a fraud for the simple fact that the background is too loud. The background is too unquantifiable to use something like PCR as a diagnostic, and certainly not with a kind of strict scrutiny equivalent that would allow us to see what they were really doing. And it's never going to be there because it is as simple as a synthetic recombinant pure signal in quantity could be found and then claimed to have found. For example, a bacteriophage could be released in Wuhan containing a sequence, and that sequence could be found and reported and claimed to be something else, evidence of something else. And it would require no special biology, just a spectacular commitment to the lie that that bacteriophage signal was indeed something else, like a coronavirus. The funny thing is that a transfection is an old word, and it would have been a crime before 2020 to do it in a healthy person without their absolute consent and them understanding how dumb it was. And the way they got away with this is with a placebo. The reason why they did it is so that transfection could be rolled out under the pretense that the mouth breathers accept it worked for COVID. So it must be a new technology that maybe even could replace the old vaccine schedule that's going to be soon admitted to be faulty because the adjuvants aren't that great for you. But there's no adjuvants in mRNA vaccines. Ladies and gentlemen, they are ruling us by mythology, one of the best things to learn what it means and therefore why it's a myth is endemicity and the idea of a molecule going endemic. With non-specific PCR tests and a spectacular commitment to lies, they could have pulled this off. RNA cannot pandemic, ladies and gentlemen. Nobody says it better than Gigaohm Biological. RNA cannot pandemic. Intramuscular injection is dumb. Transfecting healthy people is a crime. And the population pyramids are a problem in need of solving. I am not finding, where are you? There you are, right there, needs to go. Here we go. Sorry about that. Thank you very much. See you again tomorrow. I will probably post the I haven't made the decision yet. I got 3 on the plate of which one to start with. There's a set of papers that we're going to work through over the next couple weeks. I'll probably post either tonight or early tomorrow morning the Journal Club paper, and then we'll cover it on Wednesday, and then we'll do a discussion and lecture on Biology 101 on Thursday, and then Friday we'll have a little meddler stream again. I don't know what Taco Tuesday will be next week, but this was Taco Tuesday this week. Thanks very much for being here. See you guys again soon.